Welcome. This is Lucas Price, and we're back for another episode of Building Elite Sales Teams. How do I need to change as a person to be a great leader? In sales, feedback and personal development are almost always talked about as very positive things, but often learning the things about ourselves that make us realize we need to make those changes is painful and difficult. Today on Building Elite Sales Teams, we have a wide-ranging conversation that ends with a discussion on the painful realizations that lead to positive change. We are joined today by Matt Buchalski. Matt is a sales leadership professional with over 15 years of experience building and leading sales teams. He's worked in sales leadership at great companies like CA Technologies, ThoughtSpot, and more. He's currently the vice president of sales at RealPage. Matt, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and your audience.
What else should our audience know about your background?
I've had kind of the journey of two different sales industries, if you will. I started in sales a week after I graduated high school, almost 30 years ago now, which is really scary to say out loud. But I spent the first half of my career in sales of one sort or another, working at brokerage firms, collection agencies, and ultimately building out a branch office of an equipment. And then right around 2010, I just noticed a tectonic shift happening in technology, made the jump to technology. And for the last 14 years, I've had the privilege to work with some absolutely amazing companies and been on the forefront of logical innovation. But at the end of the day, my true passion is always, take me the opportunity with, an abstract idea and a big market opportunity. And those have always really been the types of opportunities that I've gravitated towards, from direct capital to HP, ThoughtSpot. Like, that's really my underlying motivation.
How did you get into sales?
I fell into sales. I knew that I wanted to be in finance. So when in high school, and when I started to apply for schools, I was applying to schools with great finance programs. And I wasn't sure if I was going to end up being an analyst or an investment banker or something, but I knew that being around money and the pace of finance actions was always something that appealed to me. And then, late in high school, we had a guest speaker come into our economics class, and this guy owned a stock brokerage firm. And he had the white Lamborghini outside and the fancy Italian shoes, shirts. And he talked about all kinds of money that he had. And I called him every day for a month. I got a job interview, and I walked into his office, and there was 150 people standing up on the phones. And I walked in and I was like, this is awesome. And so I took that job, started cold calling a week after high school, and just the enthusiasm, the camaraderie between these guys was, something I latched onto right away and never looked back, and continue to look for all those various characteristics and qualities and the opportunities that I find today.
Always curious. I always ask about the transition from sales to sales leadership. Finance is a place where I imagine, the jobs can be very lucrative. And so in a way, it can be a sacrifice to say, hey, I want to lead teams instead of just go out and, just continuing to make your money by being a seller.
Yeah, great question. I've always been fulfilled by helping others, right? Way back to my early teens, I always had this kind of entrepreneurial spirit, right? I had a paper route. I used to melt lead in my parents' garage, make fishing sinkers so I can go fishing as a 13, 14-year-old in order to get out fishing for a day. And while there's definitely some entrepreneurial characteristics about being in sales, I always tended to think of things a little bit bigger. And so when I started to get good at sales, and I think I'm a very good salesperson for a very long time, I always wanted more, right? And then I think in the early 2000s, I was working in collections, and I looked at the leader of the team, and I said, I think the reason that this team is not doing well is because the leader really didn't take his job very seriously, and he wasn't investing in people, and he wasn't hiring the right people. It showed in the team's result. In my head, I thought to myself, well, maybe this is something that you should do. And then I ended up getting an opportunity to do that shortly thereafter, and frankly, never looked back. So it was at a very early point in my career when I put the puzzle pieces together that if you want to be on a great team, you have to have a great leader. What does a great leader do? They hire fantastic people. They believe in them. They build them up. They pour into them. They love them. They empower them. They give them autonomy and a safe place to make mistakes. They're the biggest cheerleader, and they're constantly investing in making the team better and I just started to do that, got super passionate about it.
I know one of the things that you have a real passion for is educating salespeople about their finances and how to turn their sales success into a financial legacy. Can you tell us a little bit about the work that you do there?
Sure. So I've been very passionate about this for the last couple of years. I've had the benefit of working with a lot of early in career salespeople, and these are folks straight out of college and maybe first or second job. And I think I've probably hired and trained almost 1,000 of them over the last 15 years, maybe 600 or 700. But one thing really kind of jumps out at me, and it's like we get these folks early in career. We pour into them from the sales skills, sales enablement, product, overcoming objections, all the things, right? All the sales skill. We never really talk to these folks about what to do after they become successful, right? And if you're on LinkedIn, if you're listening to the show, you're on LinkedIn, you probably have a host of influencers in your feed that are helping folks become the next President's Club achievers and improve their sales skills to the point where they be top performers. And that's great. And I have a ton of respect for all of those, work with many others. What are we teaching these folks to do after they get the big check, right? And I think back to some of the probably financial mistakes I made. I remember being at President's Club, my favorite President's Club in Florida, and like my big paycheck hit while I was there, and we were in Florida for the next 3 days, and I put a healthy dent in that check that time, and probably one or two other times. And if I've had those opportunities back, those instances back, I probably would have done things differently. I feel like my calling right now is how do I help others early in career, let's just say 10 years before I did at 26, start to acquire real estate, start to set up just simple recurring withdrawals out of their checking account into a brokerage account and understand why they're doing what the long-term benefits are. We have a podcast called the More Doors Podcast, and we've had several successful salespeople on the show. Ian Koniak being a recent guest where he was number one seller at Salesforce.com at the enterprise segment for several years. And now, he talks very openly about how controlling his spending and saving for the future have now allowed him to live the life that he wants in his early 40s. And he's not in his heyday golden years, closing deals at the airport instead of being home with his kids. And that is something I'm super passionate about. It's commonsensical stuff, but I think that's typically the stuff that gets ignored or kind of mundane topics, but it's really important. I'm sure folks in your audience have either heard or discussions about the financial literacy in schools. I'm a big advocate for that. I won't get political about it or anything, but I think we've got to do a better job of financially educating our young people. But I also think as corporate society, right, we spend a lot of money training our sales team on how to be effective and make a lot of money. But aside from the obligatory 401k meeting once a year, what else can we do? What other information channels can we open? What other types of spotlight events can we put on the importance of saving for the future and the compound effect of great finding life? Again, something I'm super passionate about. And I think there's a huge opportunity there for us to go educate our salespeople. Think about the money that some folks make in their job, and if they get RSUs or if they get pre-IPO equity in certain companies and they're lucky enough to go through an exit event, there's like a windfall of, potential opportunity and capital gains there. But there's also consequences around taxes and, what you can do to kind of shelter yourself from taxes and ultimately amplify those things even more. And I think we just owe it to our people and our teams to go give them visibility to those types of topics.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's also, in the startup world, we do get these windfalls, if we're fortunate. And, when you're making kind of a steady salary and saving and investing each month, that's great. And that's what, something people should do. But I think okay, now I have this windfall. What do I do with this for this money to be productive? Financial advisors out there don't talk about that because it's a rare, often overlooked and not talked about.
Totally. And some of this is game changing, if not certainly game changing, but some of it's life changing. We saw Rubrik go public just a couple of days ago, right? I mean, the amount of wealth that event created is huge. And there's a couple other very top pre-IPO companies, but I was lucky enough to have 2 exits inside of a year. Aside from putting some money into my house, I invested all of those dollars, right? And as I look back on it now, we have a deal in contract that we'll probably close on here in the next 30 days or so. But I've managed to take that money and I can now say I have 20 million real estate assets under management, right? And I say that, and there's people out there doing bigger things than I am, and so I'm not trying to like beat my chest here, but it's amazing to take a step back and say that, right? Could I have gone out and bought a Rolex? Definitely. Could I have gone out and bought a new car or a fleet of cars? Absolutely. But the legacy wealth that I've set up for myself and my family, and the compound effect of that is huge. And I want to really empower other people to do the same thing in potentially grander scale and hopefully earlier in their life.
Thank you for sharing all that with us and with our audience. There might be members of the audience who want to start following you on that topic. How do you start putting the pieces together and go from this is an opportunity to this is a vision?
Great question. I think it's very, very simple. Talk to a lot of people and actively listen. Simple as that. When I came into ThoughtSpot and when I joined RealPage, there was some very glaring opportunities in both of those organizations. But I started out with not assuming anything and not walking in with my own agenda of what I wanted to do. I knew what needed to be done, but there were ways to accomplish your mission the right way. And I think in order to do that, you've got to talk to everyone that you possibly can, listen to them actively, and then start to aggregate your data, right? So when I came into RealPage, my boss had this great vision of a sales development and inside sales organization that he wanted to build. And we had sponsorship from the CSO. My boss is fantastic. And we had headcount. What we lacked was, the orchestration and really how to organize it. And inside of 60 days, I write it, and we haven't looked back since. But by talking to everyone, once I got into the company, we had an urgent need to fix the training and onboarding program for everyone that we were hiring, right? We didn't have definitive hiring profile or any profile, right? We had, no regimented interview process. We had no red flags that we should be looking for. And the team was actually working against the current of the rest of the organization. And we needed to course correct that, right? So my first day on the job, we were running a couple of campaigns at the same time, and we were handing out lists of contacts to people. Even though we use Salesforce.com, we're sending out the Excel versions or the Excel lists of various contacts. They hadn't been deduped. We hadn't trained the team. There was no messaging, so on and so on. This is my first week. I'm like, oh my goodness, what did I do? But I just saw that as an opportunity. And I think we've done an amazing job course correcting that. I spend time with sales ops. I spend time with the team. I spend time with all the VPs of the sales organization. I talked to anyone that I could that would give me time. And I found the common wants, common needs, common problem, and then prioritize those and started chipping away. That became my job, became chipping away at that to-do list.
That makes a lot of sense to me. You come in and you start talking to people and listening, and then themes start to emerge. You might start hearing from some people, like they're trying to accomplish the same thing, but they're doing it totally different ways. And then you start to hear from other people, hey, I'm not quite sure how I should be doing this. And so you're like, oh, okay, training, that's standardized. On the other hand, I think what my experience in those situations is that there are people that do have agendas that are telling you different things. And I think those are the most difficult things to sort through, where some people are saying, hey, no, we should do it this way. And other people are saying, no, we should do it the opposite way. And it can be really hard to get to the truth in those situations. Do you have any experience or advice about how you sort through those kind of the thornier problems or the problems where people are telling you different stories about the same thing?
Unfortunately, politics finds its way into pretty much every organization. I usually do 2 things, very simple. When I get the sense that there's an agenda coming into a conversation, I typically ask, like, why is that important? And I just genuinely wait for the answer. And if I get the sense that there's any sort of politicism there, I just kind of file that. And I think this is where allegiance with your boss and an open, trusting relationship with your boss comes in. When in doubt, go check. When you're hearing about something that kind of sticks out at you as odd, or perhaps, has an agenda or some sort of political twist to it, go double tap into that. And you'll really learn the landscape. And I think sometimes it's important for your leader to know the types of things you're hearing so that they can help give you the guiding light that you need on what is important and what is not.
I agree with that. I think that there's like a class of problems that it's just can be like really hard to sort through. And maybe this isn't necessarily at the very beginning of entering an organization, but it can be, you know, suppose you have a manager that reports to you, and then you have employees that report to them. You know, when one of those employees is struggling, fingers are going to start pointing, and it's the manager the problem, is the employee the problem. I think these are the hard problems to sort through, and I know that there's no magic answers to it. That's why they're hard problems. But
there's no magic answers, but I think they were really good questions, right? And our job as leaders is to ask really good questions. And that doesn't mean they need to be complex questions. They need to be good questions, right? Tell me about what's going on. Why do you feel that way? What examples do you have? Do you have data to support your thesis, right? What did you say? Before your manager got upset with you, what were you doing? How many times had he or she given you coaching on that? Why are you still doing it, right? Asking those questions, it really kind of approaching those things like a coach is really important. There are always two sides to a story, and the truth lies somewhere in the middle. It's our job as leader to create an environment where we can have these open and trusting and vulnerable conversations in many ways, where sometimes the person that is accusing someone else of doing something wrong is the one at fault. But if you don't have the trusting and relate that person, they'll never admit that, no matter how many questions you ask and how many heart-to-heart conversations they ask. So to your point, or to your example, like when you're in a situation as a leader where you have differences in opinion, ultimately it's your job to find your North Star and find your truth in that situation. And in my opinion, the best way to do that is ask a lot of questions and find the data to support either or both cases.
Yeah, that's great. So to kind of continue this story along, you're coming in new to an organization. You want to turn the opportunity into a vision. You talk to people, you listen. Now the vision is starting to form. You start to realize what you need to do. What's next?
Put your to-do list together, figure out which actions on that list have the most impact, the ones that you can identify that have the most impact. Where's the low-hanging fruit? Which are more strategic? And you're going to have, do you need to make an update to Salesforce.com in order to execute this? Do you need to hire a copywriter to publish a bunch of training material? Those are kind of longer projects, but find your biggest impact action item or priorities. Go find the low-hanging fruit and attack it.
Let me add on to the question a little bit. Provide a little bit more direction for it. Yeah. So you know what you want to attack. That's going to mean changes into the organization. And there's going to be, communication to the organization. There's going to be, some changes that people like, some changes that people don't like. How do you prepare the organization to be ready for this build?
Clear communication. Simple as that, right? You've got to have the ability to listen to people, collect feedback, create a plan, and then communicate that plan, right? Communication, concise communication of a plan is one of the most important tools that a leader can have, right? Here's what's got us to this point. Here's why I'm here. Here's the opportunity that I see for us. Here are the changes that we need to go through, right? When I joined ThoughtSpot, the team was large or pretty much all based in Palo Alto, California, right? I was going to help them build an office in North Dallas, right? In order to do that, we weren't going to hire a bunch of all new people. I was going to shift some headcount from Palo Alto to Plano. I was very clear about it up front, right? Some people didn't like it, but that's what I was hired to do. The more clearly you can communicate things, the better. Not everybody's going to like it, but at the same time, leadership is not necessarily a popularity contest. It's sometimes not a democracy, right? We have a job that we need to do. We have a mission to accomplish. We clearly articulate it. And now we got to go do it.
In your career, you've been a frontline leader. You've managed larger organizations. How does that communication change? How is it different for a frontline manager when you're communicating about change versus when you have to communicate through other leaders and through a larger organization?
It becomes more complex, to say the least. And I think when you're a frontline leader and you're getting kind of information passed down to you and you have a team of direct reports, it's your job to make sure that they know and get them on, right? As you move up and you become a second, third, fourth line leader, right? The amount of communication that you need to do increases, and sometimes increases exponentially, right? So I have a fantastic frontline leadership team in my organization, but they can be opinionated, right? It's their job to shoot at my ideas, right? And it's their job to question me about some of the things that I think we need to do. And as a leader, you've got to be able to take that questioning and appreciate where they're coming from, because they have a very interesting job, right? They have to make sure that their teams are engaged and teams are productive, that the team understands what's going on. But they also have a little bit of, I don't want to say bias or waffling, but it's bias or waffling, right? Especially for those other folks that you've promoted into leadership roles. So I think, as you move up, you've got to get your leadership team on board with the plan, the mission, the message. You've got to give them an opportunity to poke at it, shoot at it, sleep on it where possible, and come back with questions about the why and how. And then you communicate that out to the team in a uniform voice that everyone is completely on board with. And if you don't sell your agenda, if you don't sell your plan, you don't sell your mission like that up front, it's going to be very difficult to get everybody moving in one direction with one voice.
Yeah. In a larger organization, I think one-on-one, agendas can be sort of sold pretty quickly. In a larger organization, how much repetition do you need? How much do you need to keep hitting that same point over and over again in order to get everyone on board with it?
It's actually not that difficult for me, knock on wood, and maybe that's because of the relationship that I've built with the rest of my leadership team. I mean, they, I think of myself as kind of a conduit between the GM that I report to and the 4 or 5 leaders that I have in my organization. But I mean, we're tight, right? And I think we've done an amazing job over the last 4 years just building trust with one another. But there are certainly some hairier topics that we talk about, and you just got to create, again, I keep coming back to this, but you've got to create a space where everybody feels safe to say no, or I don't agree, or here's what we haven't talked about yet, or here's the things that we haven't thought about, and how are we going to address this? How does this offset X, Y, and Z? And you've just got to be really thoughtful. I love kind of the build process, but even my boss will tell you I'm a little bit of a bull in the china shop. This is very hard for me to do, right? I get very compelled with taking action. And sometimes I've embarked on missions where I talk to the team and I think they're on board and I rage and I go into the forest and then I look around and nobody else is there. And that is a very scary place to be as a leader. And I've learned the hard way in some circumstances that flow is smooth and smooth is fast. And if I take that extra time up front to socialize the mission, have people poke at it, identify the roadblocks, overcome them, and then spread it out so that everyone is receiving a very thought out message and strategy, then we can go very fast together.
When you're gathering that feedback from your leaders and allowing people to poke holes in it and refining your messaging and refining the plan based on that, what are mistakes that can be made that people should avoid as they're thinking about going through that process?
Not asking enough questions, right? And there are little subtle things that happen that sometimes we look past. And I'll give you a very practical example. So you're in a meeting, you're talking about something strategic that you want to roll out, and there's one person in that meeting that doesn't say much, or their body language indicates that they're not fully engaged, right? It's our job as leaders to go find time to talk to that person about what they didn't feel comfortable saying in that meeting. Because it's the unspoken that sometimes becomes louder than the voice. And we have to go, we can't assume that everyone's on board. I also really like that if I'm going to have a group meeting with my team, my leadership team, we're going to talk about something. In my one-on-ones with them, I literally say, What did you think of the meeting? What did you think of the conversation? What did you think of the reactions? Did you understand where Susie was coming from when she objected? Did you understand why Sam was excited about why this is going to be awesome? I want to really kind of double tap into all that, because you're going to unearth emotion. You're going to unearth motivations. You're going to unearth, blind spots that maybe you haven't thought about. And that's the time to identify that stuff before the ship leaves the port.
Yeah, I think that's great. I agree. I think, a lot of times as a leader, it can be valuable to go first, especially around vulnerability and, to encourage the open conversation. But when it comes to opinions about a plan, I think when a leader goes first, if people are on the fence, they can kind of like fall in line with the leader, and then you don't really hear all of their objections and so I think being able to guide, being able to hear from other people before you share what you want to do as a leader, or what your opinion is as a leader, can be valuable, but it's difficult to do. A lot of times we got to these places by having good judgment, by having opinions, and we want to share those rather than listen to others first, oftentimes.
You're 100% right. And again, some of the tougher lessons that I've learned about leadership, and especially in these types of examples, I'm really fired up that we're talking about this, because this was a blind spot of mine for a really long time, right? I would get brought into something and I'm like, yep, I'm going to go do it. And then, all right, team, this is what we're doing. Go get on the phone. This is the new message. Boom. And I wasn't winning a whole lot of influence, and I wasn't winning a whole lot of loyal members of my team. And it took me a couple of really tough 360s a long time ago to realize that. And I think that was probably some of the most difficult feedback I ever received, but resulting in the most positive change over time, right? Creating that environment, asking the questions, having human to human conversations, bringing people into the decision-making process and letting them know it's safe. It's a safe place to object. We may still go forward, but to allow your people to be heard and to let them know that you've heard them and you're going to do your best to adapt the plan, build in their suggestions, etc., is very important, and one of the most undervalued skills as a leader, in my opinion. And it's maybe not undervalued, but definitely, not spoken about enough.
What did it take to turn that difficult feedback into useful feedback? How were you able to use it instead of becoming defensive about it?
It was a very stark realization that unless I changed specifically that, I would not ever get to the level of leadership or level of influence that I really wanted to get. And I remember sitting down with my boss at the time to go through these surveys. Like, I'm a tough guy, right? I'm from New York, grew up in the streets. I was on the verge of tears a couple of times. It was just really difficult things to hear and especially read about yourself, especially the narrative part of a 360. My goodness, you can really figure out how many unhappy fans you have in your organization when you dig into that stuff. But I'm committed to self-improvement. I'm committed to being a better leader. And at the end of the day, when you break down that feedback, you can find very actionable things to do. And so I made a list of things that I thought I could change that would make it would get noticed immediately from my team. And I started to do that. And then I started to get back into reading leadership books and podcasts and the whole thing. And not only did I start consuming that content, but I started to make changes personally and professionally. So right around this time, this whole thing is happening on my professional life. I went through a very significant personal change outside of work, where I started to meditate more often and go to the gym and go on weight loss journey and the whole thing. And it all came together at the same time. And I think one of the reasons why I wasn't happy professionally is because I wasn't happy personally, right? I was drinking a lot. I was staying up late. My HR business partner used to break my chops all the time. Like, I need you to stop sending emails at 12:30 or 1 o'clock in the morning. And I want you to, next time you're about to send an email to someone on Sunday afternoon, I want you to not do that and save it in your drafts and send it Monday morning, right? This is before like you do the automated temping you can do now. And just those little changes made me less of a one-track leader and more empathetic to respecting people's time and that sort of thing. So I identified a couple of very easy action items. I went through this kind of personal and professional change at the same time. And since then, it's kind of been up and to the right in everything that it did.
Matt, I've really enjoyed this conversation. As we start to get towards the end here, what are one or two takeaways that you'd give our audience from our conversation today as kind of some of the key points that have come up?
Yeah. Embrace and execute on the concept of getting 1% better every day, whether it's personally or professionally, or maybe even both. That the compound effect of that is very real and will have huge impacts on your life. Right. I can tell you that from firsthand experience. Also, don't underestimate the power and impact of building great relationships with your boss, with your colleagues, with your direct reports, with your skips, the whole thing. Make yourself available to talk, make yourself available to listen, be there and be human with your team. It's not always about how many deals you book. It's not always about how much revenue you bring in. Did you hit your quota? Ask them about them. Know their husbands or wives' names, kids' names, pets' names, where they're going on vacation, what do they want to do next? And when you humanize their experience in working with you, the results become exponentially different.
Yeah, it's some good stuff. I really appreciated you talking about how, coming into a new situation, you got to talk to a lot of people and you got to listen. And I think that never really stops. You got to always be talking to a lot of people and listening, and asking really good questions has a big impact on that. And then here at the end, when you shared about how you realized you had to change in order to be the leader that you wanted to be. And a lot of us, talk about personal development and we talk about it in a way that it's just all positive. And, but the truth is that it's really difficult. A lot of times in order to get to where we need to be as leaders, we have to confront things about our identity that's not the way we view ourselves. And that can be really difficult, but going through that difficult journey is what gets us where we need to be as leaders. And so I really appreciate you kind of sharing and opening up a little bit about that.
Of course.
Where can our audience find you online? You mentioned the podcast. Maybe you could give us a little bit more about where to find that and where else to find you online as well.
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity. Yeah. So you can find me on LinkedIn. It's Matt Buchalski. I think I'm the only one, but don't quote me. I'm all over LinkedIn. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, all the places. And then we have a podcast called the More Doors Podcast. It's really geared towards real estate investing. I'm a co-host of that show. We release about an episode a week, but it's very relevant to your audiences. We're taking intentional effort to talk to folks that have grown up in technology sales and sales positions, and either build themselves legacy wealth, and in some cases really escape the W-2 and take their next steps as an entrepreneur inside of multifamily real estate. So check out the show. We've had Ian Koniak from Salesforce. We have Sam Silverman on the show. We have a couple other amazing guests coming up specifically from the technology sales and sales leadership field, and more coming after that.
Great. And if you enjoyed this episode of Building Elite Sales Teams, please leave us a review in your podcast app. You can find more of our content online at yardstick.team/blog. We also have a YouTube channel. And if you have any feedback for us, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Thank you for joining us today.